Hello. Apologies for the technical problems this morning. Try and get that sorted for next week. Um, Instead, therefore, I'm going to record this webinar and I'll send you this link when I've finished. Today we're going to look at tracking grids, and we're going to look also at analysis grids. Tracking grids and analysis grids are very much underused, I think, within SIMS. Many secondary schools and primary schools that I go and visit hardly know of their existence. Some schools that do find them complicated to use and a little bit counterintuitive. And like many things in SIMS, that's got more than an element of truth in it. But once you, as an assessment expert for your organisation, once you get into them, I think they're relatively straightforward to create. And indeed, you'll notice that with a lot of these grids, like a lot of things in SIMS, the first grid may take you quite a while to put together, but subsequent grids are really quite quick because we can reuse the various elements that we create for the first grid. We can start to reuse those elements in other grids as well. So I think they're well worth your investment in time. Without any more ado, let's have a look at the screen. So I'm in SIMS here, and hopefully you can see what I can see. Okay, we're going to look at a tracking grid first. So I'm going to go up to focus, down to assessment, and then down to, well, tracking grids. There's two options for tracking grids, very similar to templates for mark sheets. We have two options here. One to create the template that sits behind the actual tracking grid. So this is the bit that you'll use as the assessment expert. This is the bit that teachers will use when they're actually running these grids live. So I'm going to go in via tracking grid templates. Here's a set of tracking grids that we've created before. In fact, no, I'm not going to go in through tracking grid templates. I'm actually going to go to focus assessment, and I'm going to first of all look at this as one of your teachers. So I'm actually going to go to focus assessment and tracking grids. So this is what a teacher would see. And here's some of the templates that we've set up already in the system. And I'm just going to highlight a few of them. We'll start with this one. This is a termly progress tracking grid. Let's get you into the hang of what these grids can do. So I'm going to double click on termly progress here. And what we have basically for all these tracking grids is just a grid, pure and simple. In this particular case, our columns are national curriculum sublevels, and our rows are result sets or terms or whatever you want to call it, going down the bottom there. So this is going to look at how a particular group of pupils has progressed over time. You see up at the top here, next to the grid name, we've got an assessment drop down, and that lists all the different subjects that this particular grid has been set up for. See, English, Maths and Science. So this is looking at the core subjects at Key Stage 3. I'll leave it on Key Stage 3 English Attainment. I'm going to put some pupil names on here. Tracking grids, one of the chief differences between a tracking grid and a group analysis or an aspect analysis or one of those other grids is that tracking grids actually put pupil names into these squares here. So you actually get a personal touch rather than the actual tracking grids and so on that just, the analysis grids that just put numbers in there, anonymous numbers of pupils or percentages of pupils. A tracking grid is focused on giving you actual names of pupils. That's why tracking grids are great perhaps for individual class teachers or heads of department, because very quickly you can identify individual pupils. Whereas the analysis grids, group analysis, aspect analysis and so on, they're better for arenas where you need to be more anonymous about the data or more top-down in your approach to data. So for governors reports, for LA reports, for all those other school improvement professional reports, that kind of thing is what grids analyses are for. But this is a tracking grid, so this is going to put pupil names on here. Let's first of all select our source group of pupils. Now I'm going to choose, in the first instance, just a registration group for year 9. So I'm going to pick 9B there. And I'm going to click the populate button. And hopefully at this stage we should see some pupils appear on here. Sometimes these grids can take a little bit of time to actually populate. This one's not too bad. What it's done here is we've got pupil names on here. And this row here is headed Year 7 baseline. This is a school that baselined their pupils at the start of Year 7. And Fiona, Helena, Gloria and Hetty here were baselined as being at a 5A. A few terms later, these pupils were to 5A. So by Year 7 spring term, these were the 5A pupils. Helena and Fiona had moved on to a 6C and a 6B. So straight away, you can see that this particular style of tracking grid is great at showing progress term on term. So we can see there's a general movement of pupils across the terms, and as we get into Year 9 autumn term, which is the last term for which we have any data, we can see where the individual pupils are. We can also spot pupils who are getting left behind. So, for example, Kai here has been pretty consistently left behind. In fact, he's getting further and further behind as the rest of the pack pulls away. Other things we can do on here. We have a group filter, and it's the same group filter that is available in a mark sheet. So, for example, if we want to pick out just the pupil premium pupils from this list, we can put a filter on this mark sheet, click the populate button again, and now we have just the pupil premium pupils down there. Each of the individual names on a tracking grid are also links, and if you click on the link, it takes you through to the pupil's student, the teacher's student screen with a photograph, copy of the timetable, and lots of lovely attendance details, plus behaviour details as well if you're using the behaviour system. Use the back button to get back. There we go. Very easy once we've shown English. This is English Pupil Premium therefore, so let's look at maths. So I just need to change the drop down and click populate. And there we go. So here's how those same pupils are doing in maths. At the moment I've chosen a source group of 9B. Well, of course, one of the main uses of these grids is to provide your class teachers with a nice summary of their pupils, their 30 pupils in their own class. I'm going to change this therefore, and I'm going to change it. I'm going to use the course tab. I'm sure you're familiar with using the course option here. Now, we're at that funny time of year, it's July. So when I open up the course tab there, it looks as though I have no courses. The reason for that is because we're working in July, all the courses have actually finished. So therefore none of these pupils is a member of any current English or maths course. I can get around that just by changing the from and to dates. And the easiest way to do that is just to change the digit for July to June or May or whatever, and click refresh. So that now refreshes this list. And when I open up course now, of course, I can, as somebody with perhaps a head of department for English, I can say, okay, well, let's look at this person's class here. Let's apply that. So use that as the group. Let's take off the pupil premium filter. And let's also change the group membership date, so that also reflects the same date. And let's click populate. So now we should get the people in that class on the 28th of June 2016 with their data in. Now, of course, if you're doing this at a normal time of the year, you don't have to bother with changing those dates. It's only while we're in this sort of July-August period, where for the majority of schools that I go and visit, the timetable is set up so that the actual teaching classes no longer exist. It's just one of the things about doing a summer school. So yeah, if I was head of English, I might want to talk this through with the person who teaches this class, and we can have a very quickly. You can have a conversation that zooms in on the individual pupils who you need to talk about. I do find these tracking grids very, very useful. This is one style of tracking grid. There are almost as many different types of tracking grids as you can shake a stick at. For example, I've loaded up a few different styles of tracking grids. That was a termly progress one. This next one is called a minimum expected progress matrix, I suppose. Raise Online for many years had Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 4 transition matrices. And if I load this one up, I think it's this one. I'll not save the changes. You might recognize this from the Raise Online transition matrices. What we've got here is a grid that plots Key Stage 2 results in terms of a whole level, level 2, level 3, level 4. So this row here will contain the names of every pupil who achieved a level 4 at Key Stage 2. We've set C as being a T cell, so that's a target cell. So our target is everybody who achieved a level 4 at Key Stage 2 to get a C grade at GCSE. And likewise, everybody who got a level 3 at Key Stage 2 needs to get a D. And everybody who got a 5, a level 5 at Key Stage 2 is targeted to achieve a B. This is basically the old 3 levels of progress measure, so beloved of the DFE. On its way out now, but still relevant across a lot of different schools. So how do we populate this with data? This one's a little bit trickier. We're looking at maths. Well, let's have a look at maths for year 11. So the source group here, I'm going to choose as year 11. Along the top, we've got the maths attainment grade. And for this particular grid, I have to actually specify the result set. Of course, in our school, we've been doubtless setting grades on at least a termly basis. So for this group of year 11 pupils, there'll probably be a year 11 autumn, spring and summer result in for them. So we have to tell the grid which of those we actually want to plot. To do that is where perhaps the design of tracking grids lets itself down a little bit. Because what we've got to do is we've got to right click somewhere in this area here. So wherever this white line where the column header is, we have to right click and it comes up with an option that says select result set for columns. And from that, we've got a drop down menu that lists all the result sets in school. And I'm going to pick year 11 autumn term. Now it's this right clicking in this area here that I think is a major problem with the interface design here. The majority of teachers forget to do this, or they don't understand result sets because it's a jargon that they're not into. So therefore, if it goes wrong, it's usually this part of tracking grids that causes problems. So that's the columns sorted out. So I've told the system what I want to pick up for the columns. I've also got to tell it what I want to pick up for the results down at this side of the screen. Now, as a default, it's going to plot the same aspect here as it plots here. So again, I need to right click. And this time I've got an option that says select assessment for the roles. And for the roles, I want a Key Stage 2 maths test. I also need to tell it the result set for that Key Stage 2 maths test, which is a special result set called the Key Stage 2 validated results here. So at this point, now having told it the source group, the aspect for the columns, the result set for the columns, the aspect for the roles, and the result set for the roles, I can click the populate button. And hopefully now I'll get some names on this grid. Here we go. Let's have a look at the row for our level 4s. So these are all the pupils here who achieved a level 4 at Key Stage 2. And you can see Ben Abbott down to Nick Nicholas down there are underperforming. They've only, so far, in year 11 autumn term, they were rated as D. These pupils are more or less where we expect them to be at a C, and these pupils are doing very well because they are currently working at a B. You can see that we've got colours on here and an idea of what the target is. This grey cell here is a target cell. And you can see that it's behind there, it's hidden slightly, but it is a letter T, which marks this as being the target cell. We've also got 3 columns here, 1, 2, 3, that say below target, on target, and above target. And these are getting their statistics from the relative positions of the pupils to this cell here. So the pupils who are below target is anybody to the left of that. So the 21% there are these pupils here. The 18% there, whoops. The 18% there are these pupils here. And the 61% are these pupils in the middle. We can change that from percentages to a count. So that tells us how many of those pupils have made that particular grade. We can also, while we're here, click on some summary rows. If I click on summary rows and then show summary rows, my screen's a little bit small, so it's not showing that particularly well. But what we've got, for example, on this row for everybody who got a 3 at Key Stage 2, what this is telling us, once we've added the summary rows, is that 10 pupils are here in this particular square. 4 pupils are in this square. And we can fine-tune that a little bit more by clicking on Split Totals by Gender. And that gives us a boy-girl split. So in this particular cell, we have 3 boys and 1 girl. And in this one, we have, again, 3 boys and 7 girls. I'll take the summary rows off and go back to this. As we did with the other tracking grid, we've also got the option to use the drop-down and show maths results or the Key Stage 2 results. Not quite sure why Capita put 2 lots of GCSE maths results in there, probably for Capita's own reasons. But there's no reason why this can't be, a similar tracking grid can't be produced for English, science, or indeed any subject at all. And they are very, very useful, as I said. Okay, so that's a transition matrix. Let's have a look at some more before we try one of these ourselves. So I'm going to have a look at this one. Key Stage 4 latest grades. I'll not save the changes. Slightly different approach here. And this is just going to pick up the latest entered grade. If I don't put a result set here, if I don't specify a result set, tracking grids just pick up the last entered grade. So now if I click on populate there, no need to select a source group, it's just giving me a summary of the last entered grade for each of those pupils. And you see we've set C as our target, so it gives us the percentages below, on target and above target. Okay, so that's an important thing to remember when you're creating tracking grids. If you don't specify a result set, it will just pick up the last entered grade. Now that can be exactly what you want. So for example, if a pupil doesn't have a grade for this term but did have one for last term, it will pick up last term's grade and include them on the report here. But be a little bit careful, because in a scenario where you, for example, retrospectively go back and add a grade out of chronological order, so say we're in the summer term and you go back and add an autumn term grade, what these tracking grids actually do is display the last entered grade. So in that scenario where you're backfilling data, if you don't specify a result set, for example like this, there is a risk that the data you're showing to your users will be incorrect. So while it can sometimes work in your favor, sometimes it's actually better to specify result sets, because I now know that each of these pupils has a result in Year 11 autumn term, and this is the one. If a pupil didn't have a result in Year 11 autumn term, and I've specified it here, their name would not appear on this grid. So that's just a little warning there, a potential issue. Okay, well, let's have a look at maybe creating some of these grids. Let's give a simple grid a go, and we'll create it from scratch. I'm going to close this all down now, not save the changes. And I'll go to focus, down to assessment, and down to tracking grid templates. It's the templates where we do all the kind of hard work on this. And I'm going to create a new template. And I'm just going to call it, I'm going to put an exclamation mark at the start just to differentiate it. I'm going to call this Year 9 progress. When we start to create these grids, basically this is giving us an impression of what the final grid will look like as though it was a sheet of A4 in landscape mode. It also greys out all the options that we can't use at this particular point. In other words, it's kind of like a wizard sort of approach that's trying to guide us through the process. So the first thing we have to do is define what we want to appear as our roles horizontally. Now I'm going to create a grid that shows term by term, every term from the start of year 7 to the end of year 9. And it's going to show us the same pupils as they move through the school. And hopefully it's going to show us how they've improved as they've moved through the school. So my roles are going to be terms. I'll click on roles. Now, given that the roles are terms and given that you know Assessment Manager, you know that terms are also called result sets. So we're going to look at the result set pattern. Now, a pattern is just a set of pre-created column headings or row headings in this particular case that we can use and reuse in different places. Let's click on result set pattern. And these are some of the result sets that have already been set up. I'm going to ignore those and pretend I don't have any set up. I'll take you through this pattern creation process from scratch because it's key to tracking grids. It's really important. I'm going to click on New to set up a new pattern. I'm going to call this, I'm going to use the exclamation mark again. I'm going to call this Key Stage 3 terms for year 7 to 9. And I'll click on OK. There's our pattern, but it's blank. There's no elements in it. All an element is a column or a row heading. So I'm going to create some new column or row headings by clicking the New button there. Here's all the result sets on my system. Loads and loads and loads of them. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to tick each of the year 7 terms, each of the year 8 terms, and each of the year 9 terms. Click on select, and that has basically created some row headings for the side of our new grid. So the first row will be linked to the result set called year 7 autumn term. The second row will be linked to the result set called year 7 spring term, and so on. Now click apply now, you'll see that it starts to create the grid. Like that. Now I've got some rows down there, now I've specified these result sets for my rows, I can go to columns. That's ungrayed itself now. Remember, it's grayed out earlier. If I click on columns, we've got this idea of patterns again. So these are some patterns. If I was lucky, I might already have a pattern I could use, because along the top here, what I want to see are the sub-levels that could be achieved by these pupils between year 7 and year 9. So in this particular case, it's a grade pattern. Because sub-levels in Assessment Manager are grades, it's the grade pattern that I need to pick up on here. So I'll click on grade pattern. Here are some grade patterns I created earlier. Now, as you create these patterns yourself, you'll find you can reuse patterns. Now, I'm not going to do it here because I want to pretend. I'm pretending that we've never used this system before. But look, here's a pattern I created yesterday called NC sublevels, and it actually contains all the sublevels that I'm going to use in a moment. So as you build up your list of patterns, you'll find that creating these new grids is a whole lot quicker. I mentioned earlier, you'll probably spend a long time creating your first tracking grid because you have to create all these patterns from scratch. But once you've created your first one, subsequent tracking grids should be very, very simple and straightforward. So I'm going to now ignore these completely, pretend I've not got them, and I'm going to create one from scratch. I'm going to click on the New button. I'm going to use the exclamation mark again, and I'm going to call it National Curriculum Sublevels. And those sub-levels are going out, but the same principle will apply to 1 to 9 grades. It will apply to age-related expectations. It applies to all those other things as well. Same idea. So there's a pattern. There's our new pattern, but there's nothing in it. There are no column or row headings as yet defined. So I'm going to define them. I'm going to click on New, and I'm going to say, okay, well, our pupils, when they come to our school, really, they're all level 3 and above. So I'll say, well, the lowest grades really is a 3C. So I could put grade 3C as my column header. So that will appear as the column heading. The actual value is the actual grade that I want to put in here. So if I put a value of 3C in here, when this column is displayed, only pupils who've got a 3C will be put into this column. I'll click Update. I'll click on New again. And the next one we'll call grade 3B. We'll carry on. And so on. Now, I'll add some more in here now. I'm not just for speed here. I'm just going to put the minimum description I need in here. What we can also do with these is put an aggregate column in there. So looking at this now and thinking about it, maybe in our school we do have pupils who are below 3C, but we don't have many of them. So we can put an aggregate column in here that says below level 3. And that contains everybody who is a 1A, a 1B, a 1C, or a 2A, 2B, and a 2C. The order in here doesn't matter. It just matters that we've captured all the grades that might classify as being below level 3. It's puts it at the end, so I can use the up arrow key here. I'll just put the level 5s and level 6s on. So 5C. I'll leave it at 5A. Obviously, if this was a live one, I would continue onwards and put the other grades in as well, but I'll just leave it at that for now because we don't have all day. So there we've got a pattern called National Curriculum Sublevels. I'll save that pattern and I'll apply it. So there we go. We've got some column headings in there. You can see how it's starting to flesh out. Obviously, you do the level 6s, 7s and 8s and add those to the list. Okay, looking good so far. What we might also want to do at this stage is set some targets. We might say that when our pupils come into school in year 7, then we target our pupils as being a 4B, or we expect our pupils to be at a 4B. All I did there was set that column as a target by highlighting it and pressing T on the keyboard. Maybe we maintain that expectation, but by the end of the summer term, we'd like them to be a 4A. It's not very challenging, is it really, this? But you get the idea that we can set targets and increment those targets by specifying a particular cell and highlighting it, pressing T on the keyboard like that. And the video course, goes into more details about how you can do that. Let's put the summary columns on there. The summary columns are the ones that say what percentage of pupils are below, on, and above. There we go. Simple as clicking on show columns there. So when we run the grid, it will put those pupils on there. So we've got a grid. That's looking good now. It looks more or less like we want it to look. But we haven't told the grid exactly which aspects to use. We've not told it where to find the data. So we need to tell it which aspects contain the data. Now, when Capita were designing this, they very wisely did not choose to present ordinary teachers with that massive long list of aspects that you doubtless have on your own system. They could have done. They could have said, yeah, here you go, here's a long list of aspects, choose the one that contains the data you want to put on this grid. They didn't, luckily. And the way they avoided doing that was by introducing this concept of associated assessments in section 2 here. We need to create an association to just those aspects that contain data that we allow to be used with this grid. It's a filter, if you like, to stop teachers picking stupid aspects. Click on Edit, and it comes up with a list of associated assessments that we've already created. Again, I'm going to ignore those. I'm going to pretend that we've never used this before. And I'm going to create a new association. I'm going to call it English KS3. And I'll click on OK. And there it is. But it's not linked to any aspect, because this is the thing about associations. We have to link an association to one of our aspects. We see the aspect names as assessment managers. All the end user sees is this, English KS3. So it simplifies it down. So I'm going to link English KS3 with an aspect on my system called English Attainment Level, which is that one. If I save that, there's our new aspect. If I put a tick in the box against it and click on Apply, now when we run this grid, the only thing that the end user can choose is this particular assessment, and they won't be able to choose anything else. I could at this stage add maths, science and other assessments, maybe another 2 or 3 to this list, but at the end of the day, all the end user could do is choose one of those 3. They can't choose anything else. So it's just a little sort of safety thing that stops people making silly choices. Hopefully now we have a grid that we can run. So I'm going to save that. To run it, I'll go into the normal route for running tracking grids, which is assessment and tracking grids. There's our new tracking grid there. Double click on it. It's picked up English Key Stage 3. If I'd associated an aspect with more subjects, then they would also appear as a drop down there. All I should need to do is pick up my Year 9 source group, click Apply, click Populate, and it should populate this grid with all my Year 9 results. After a short pause. There we go. Yes, there was rather a lot of data in that. It was not just going through all the Year 9s, but all their results as well. So yeah, that's why it took a while then. So there you go. So there's our first example of a tracking grid. Like I say, the first one will take you half an hour, or maybe even an afternoon. But subsequent ones should only take you 10, 20 minutes at the most to create. And they are very powerful. So yes, I hope you've found that bit useful. That's it for tracking grids. I mentioned before that the actual video lectures will take you through some different examples of tracking grids and how to create them. It'll go into more details about patterns and so on and so forth. I was very intentionally putting tracking grids first in my training sessions. The reasons why I put tracking grids first is they are the easiest ones to get our heads around, but also because the patterns that we create for tracking grids, we also use in the next step, which is the analysis grids. So we're going to have a look now at the analysis grids. And I'll take you through some examples of how they work. We'll run those analysis grids. I'd like to give you a flavour for the whole point of them, really, and show you some different examples that will hopefully give you some ideas for how you can use assessment grids as well in your school. So let's have a look. Let's go up to Focus, down to across to Assessment, and here they are: Group Analysis, Aspect Analysis, Result Set Analysis, and Chance Analysis. Not quite sure why Capita have split them up by putting these in the middle, but it's these 4 particular grids that we're referring to here. Let's have a look at group analysis first. Oops, focus, assessment, and group analysis. Let's load some group analyses up just to give you an idea of what you can do. Okay, we're loading this one up. When you load up analysis grids, you often see this screen appearing, especially if in your school you have used versions in grade sets. If it does appear, this is telling us that we have a grade set in our system called Key Stage 4 GCSE Attainment, and it was given 2 versions. And we had a version that ran till 2012 and a version that ran thereafter. Choose the one that ran most recently. So I'm going to choose that version and click on OK. What's this one doing? It's, at first sight, it's perhaps not that thrilling. It's picking out for our current year 10s their average grade across a long range of subjects. So it's saying in English, the average grade of our current year 10s is C. In science, it's D. In biology, the average grade is a B, and so on, across all the different subjects that we offer. So it's really a top-down report. I suppose looking at this, you'd be a bit concerned about history. You'd be concerned about additional science, and one or two of the other subjects, and you'd be very pleased with music, art, and physics. Nice thing about these grids is they do give you the option of actually finding out how that number or grade was arrived at. So in additional science, the average grade is a D. Well, how was that grade arrived at? You can double click on the numbers, or the grades in this case. So if I double click on that D, what it's done is it's brought up all the grades of everybody who's taking that subject in year 10. And that tells us how it got to that D grade average for additional science. And here's art. Here's everybody who's taking art in year 10. And there's their individual grades down the side. You can copy that and paste it into a spreadsheet if you wish. They also give us the option of showing those individual pupils within the grid. Notice on this here, there's a little plus sign there between the side of year 10 all. And if we click on it, it lists all the pupils in year 10 and what grades they are getting in each and every subject. Down here we've also got a show groups option, and it defaults to all, but we can also click on male, click on female, and click on populate grid. Again, this little box pops up. I'll choose the most recent grade set. What it's now done is it's showing us the all line at the top, but it's also done a boy-girl split underneath. So here's the averages for just the girls, here's the averages for the boys. And notice that difference in maths there, where the average for the girls is a D, the average for the boys is a C. So you can look at differences between boys and girls in terms of their results by using this tick box approach. I'll click on populate grid again to refresh it. What can we also do? Well, we're showing the average grade there, and the average grade is a bit of a broad brush. There are 6 points within the old GCSE grade systems, and this B might be a very different B from that B. For example, that might be just be a B, somebody just scraping in there, the average just scrapes it up to a B. That might be a B that's almost an A. So instead of showing the mean grade, sometimes it's better to show the mean value. And here we get the values behind the grades, and you can see that for some subjects there are big differences. For others, there aren't big differences at all. So you can see there that these were average grade Bs. Well, a B is 46 points. These are 48.3, 48.5, and 48. So I suppose you'd say, well, they are Bs, but they're not even middle Bs. They're quite low Bs. Especially art there. If we look at art, so somebody just creeping in there. 46 is the value. So art is a very low B, just in the B threshold there. But you can see there, this gives the data a little bit finer. There's more information there for your heads of department to look at. Okay, we can also export these to a spreadsheet, and there are even limited graph functions on here. Now, the graphs on these grid analyses are normally quite poor, but in a situation like this, where you just have a single row, it's often worth clicking this button. I know we've got fancy tools like Sims Discover and all those other nice things, but we can very quickly, within these grids, create graphs like this, which to me is as good as anything Sims Discover can provide for us. As I say though, if you have 2 or 3 rows on here, those graphs quickly become quite unintelligible. But in a situation like this where we just have a single row, then they can be very good. Also got the group filter down here. So we talked about looking at boys versus girls down there. We've also got the group filter, the standard group filter, that would enable us to pick SEN pupils, and any other group of pupils that we want to analyse. Doesn't look like we've got any SEN pupils specified for year 10, but you get the idea, that anything you can do with these grids, you can also do for subgroups of pupils. Let's just have a quick look just to prove a point. Let's have a look at pupil premium pupils. So there's our pupil premium pupils, and the average is for just the pupil premium pupils. Oh yeah, a button there that says rounding on. Again, we can round those up to the nearest whole number, which can make it a little bit more digestible. Okay, so that's the first example. Let's have a look at the next one. I'll save those changes. Here's another example. Here's one where we've lined up all the different year groups in school, and we've chosen English attainment level. So we're looking at just one particular aspect here. And here is the average grade, the mean grade that all our pupils achieved. So this is looking at our current year 7, our current year 8, and our current year 9s, and it's telling us what they have achieved. Not quite sure about this data. Why for our current year 7s we've got some year 8 data in there, but that's just a quirk of this little system. But for example, for our year 9s here, we know that at the end of year 8 we're averaging a 5A. Double click on the 5A, and that will tell us what they actually got in that year 8 summer term. That's how that data was actually arrived at. Again, you can click on the little plus sign there to give the actual names of the pupils. And again, we can swap between mean grade and mean value to give that a little bit more information, a little bit more accurate in terms of how close they are maybe to the next grade boundary up. And we said before, we can put a boy-girl split on there. So now we've got, there's our original year 7 line, and there's a line that reports all the girls and all the boys. So that's what that one. Let's have a look at the next one. Here's another example. This is another group analysis report. In this one, we're looking at the whole of year 10 on this top line, and then we split it down into each of the individual teaching groups on the subsequent lines underneath. So you can see there as a head of English that you'll be very interested. Hopefully you'll be thinking, well, hopefully these are all ability groups. If they weren't, you'd be very worried. There you go. So this one specifically is looking at English Key Stage 3 results. So you can always tell from this square here exactly what data is being analysed. So this is telling us that it's the English teacher assessment for Key Stage 3 in a result set called Key Stage 3 Validated Results. And these are the year 10 classes. So I suppose this would be useful to show the year 10 teachers at the start of the academic year so that they know exactly what their makeup of their pupil cohort is. They might be especially interested in the less able pupils, and certainly in this particular class, 14.29% of them were below level 3 at Key Stage 3. Who are those pupils who maybe need a bit of extra support? Well, it's 2 pupils, and they got a level 2 at Key Stage 3. That's why sometimes it's useful to be able to swap between percentage of results and count of students. So this gives us a count, each individual name there down the side. Okay, let's have a look at another one. Similar idea to this one. Again, we're looking at the same results. We're looking at the English Key Stage 3 result, but this is giving us a cumulative score. This is who's got a level 3 and higher, level 4 and higher, level 5 and higher, level 6 and higher, level 7 and higher, level 8, that kind of report. So we can do cumulative totals as well as just reporting the actual percentage. Like I say, 3 and above, 4 and above, 5 and above, 6 and above, 7 and above, 8 and above on the top there. We're not limited to just analysing the data that's maybe there as a GCSE grade or a 1 to 9 grade, one of the standard ones. We can also, I know a lot of you do this, you use a grade to record whether a pupil is on, above or below target, ragging, whatever you want to call it, A or B grades, whatever you call it in school. You can also plot those grades on here, and we have here a column that just analyses for a group of year 7s, what percentage of pupils are on, above and below. Probably the code there is O, A or B, that kind of approach. So that's a group analysis. So a group analysis is basically an analysis where each of the roles is some kind of school group. So it's a class, it's a year group, it's a registration group, it's a discover group as well. Now, when we come to do Discover, I'll show you how we can use Discover groups in these group analyses. So it could be a group that says pupil premium, non-pupil premium. Each of those could be a line on a group analysis. So I've put some group analyses together for schools that look at all the vulnerable groups. SEN, non-SEN, pupil premium, non-pupil premium, EAL, non-EAL, ethnicity groups, white British, non-white British, that kind of analysis can all go on one of these group analyses. Let's have a look at the next type. The next type is called an aspect analysis. They do what they say on the tin, these. An aspect analysis for its roles can contain aspects, and that in our systems usually means subjects. So each separate role, if you like, is going to be a different subject, going from art down to whatever it is down at the bottom, zoology, at the bottom of the list. Let's have a look what we've got in terms of good examples here. Let's look at this first one. So yeah, here's a good example. So we're looking here at some Key Stage 3 results. We're looking at whole levels, we're not looking at sub-levels, we're looking at whole levels. And it's listing all the subjects that we offer at Key Stage 3 and telling us what percentage of results are in each of the different levels. And you can see how easily this could be adapted for the new 1 to 9 grades or whatever. And again, we've got all the usual ability to double click on a number and see exactly which pupils those consist of. The next one, again, similar idea, but this one we are expanding it so that it's got all the different sub-levels on there. Similar approach again, this time with GCSE grades, but we can fine-tune these columns so that instead of just representing a single grade, they represent aggregated grades. So there we've got a column there that's counting up all the A star to C grades in English, all the A star to G grades in English, as well as giving us a separate line, for a separate column rather, for each individual grade. Here's one that looks at how far they are away from the target. A lot of schools have this idea of a residual, where it's the difference between what they targeted to achieve and what they've actually achieved, and putting that into a number format. And this is one that's taken this and basically come up with this grid, which tells us that perhaps, I don't know, looking at a subject where we might have an issue. For example, in geography, we have 4 pupils who are 3 whole grades below their target, and 4 pupils who are 2 grades below the target, and so on. And again, you can double click on the numbers to find out who these pupils are. It's done that little bit of maths as well, so it's working on the GCSE point scores where each grade is worth 6 points. So minus 18 means they are 3 GCSE grades away from there. It's actually calculated minus 18, but these grids are smart enough to put it in the column that says 3 grids below. Let's have a look at another one. I think we've more or less seen that one before. That's looking at actual attainment term by term. Okay, so that's how aspect analyses and how aspect analyses work. Like I say, in aspect analyses, it's subjects as roles. Let's have a quick look at result set analyses. Now, we know what a result set is because we work with Assessment Manager all the time, but a result set is a term. A result set to us says, well, year 7 autumn, year 7 spring, and so on. Let's see if we can pick out a couple. So result set analyses are really good for looking at progress over a period of time. So here's a good example. Here's an example where we have picked up a year 9 group. Sorry, it's a year 9 group. We can see them there from the group filter. And it's also picked up the English attainment level as an aspect. And it's picked out the results that were given for the year 7 baseline, autumn term, all the way down to the summer term. So you can see a nice progression there of numbers as people move from one grade boundary to the next. So that's a result set analysis. Let's have a look at the next one. Yeah, and this one is a similar idea. So looking at from year 7 baseline through to year 9 summer term. And this one is just averaging out the grades that pupils have achieved in each of those terms. So this is looking at the same group. This is just the year 9 pupils. And this is working out what their average grade was across the different subjects. And we can see, perhaps a little suspiciously, maybe this data is not particularly random, we can see that all subjects have been neck and neck for the whole of their school career. They've always had the same grade across all 3 subjects. I am quite sure in a real school it would not be quite so even, and it would allow you to look for subjects where maybe English or maths or science, one of them was maybe falling behind or something like that. So that's a result set. Let's just have a quick look just to round this off at chance analysis. Now, a chance analysis, again, coming back to what we did on all those tracking grids, where we created one that was very similar to the Raise Online transition matrices. With a tracking grid, we were able to put pupil names on there, which is great for heads of department or class teachers. But really, if you wanted to show that information to the DFE or to the governors or whatever, you'd want something more anonymized. And that's where a chance analysis can come in useful. Here's an example of a very similar one, where again, we've got Key Stage 2 results as rows down the side. So these are all the pupils who got a level 4. As columns along the top, we're actually picking up here a Welsh Board English exam. So this is an example of some data being pulled directly from Exams Organiser. If you're a whiz with the exam codes, you'll probably recognise that as one of the English exams. And therefore, these are results that have been brought in for a specific year, in this case the 2012 cohort at Key Stage 4. So again, yeah, these are your level 4s. You'd want them to get a C. If they get anything less than a C, you'd be disappointed. So you could say, well, what's happened with these pupils here who came in at a level 4 but only managed to get an F grade? Who are they? It's these pupils here. What happened? Bit of a post-mortem by this stage. But if you use aspects that are current, your year 10 autumn term, you've got time to do something about it once you've identified them. So that's a whistle-stop tour of what the different analyses do. Like I say, on the course, we're going to go into a lot more details about how to create them. I'm just going to finish off, though, by creating a simple group analysis so you can see how similar the group analysis process is to the tracking grid process we did earlier. So let's create an example group analysis now. I will just show you hopefully how straightforward it is. So I'm going to go to focus, down to assessment, and down to group analysis. And I'm going to click on the new button here to create a new group analysis. And when we do, it starts to step us through with a little wizard. So the first thing it's asking us to define is what we want to appear as rows. So this is a group analysis. So the patterns automatically default to group style patterns. If I click on the magnifying glass, it comes up with a familiar looking group chooser. And I'm going to choose year groups 7, 8, and 9. So each of these will be a row. We'll have a 3-row analysis grid. So each of those will appear there. If I wanted to, I could change the order of those if they come out of order. I'm quite happy with year 7, year 8, and year 9. I'll click on apply. So now that back to this screen, I can click the next button. And then it says, okay, let's talk about columns. So we moved on to columns now. What do we want to appear as columns? And it gives us various options. Well, I want the national curriculum sublevels to appear as columns on this grid. So I'm going to click on grades, because national curriculum sublevels are recorded as grade aspects. It's a grade pattern. I'm going to click on the column pattern chooser. You might remember that a few minutes ago, when we were doing the tracking grids, we created a pattern called national curriculum sublevels. And that's the important thing about these grids, is that they can use and share patterns we've created either in other grids or in tracking grids. So I'm going to choose this one again, and I'll click next. We can ignore the defaults in there. We can always change these at runtime. I'll click next again. Then on this screen, it's saying, okay, which actual aspect do you want us to analyze? Where is the data to put in the individual cells on this grid? Well, we're going to pick up our aspect that's called English attainment level. And we'll pick up the result set. And we'll leave the result set blank. And when we leave the result set blank, it will pick up the most recently entered grade for those pupils. So we'll leave the result set blank, and it's going to pick the most recent result. And I'll click next. Outcome type I'll leave at count. We can change it at runtime if we want to. I'll click on finish. And there we go. It's put in there using our data. It's put in there the numbers of pupils who've achieved each of those separate grades. So you can see how simple and straightforward these grids are to create, and they become simpler and more straightforward as you create your own patterns. And basically you just fit the right pattern into the relevant grid. Whether or not you would give these to teachers or senior managers as tools for them to use interactively, that's up to you. I know some schools that do and do it successfully. But in any large school, I think you're always going to have some members of staff who need extra support with these grids. And for that reason, a lot of schools do choose to use the export option there, for example, and export those grids out to a spreadsheet. Only problem with that is you lose a lot of the interactivity with them. But it's up to you. Horses for courses, I suppose. So I hope that's encouraged you to use analysis grids. Like I say, my personal experience was when I first saw these, I didn't get them. It took me a good few goes to get the hang of them. And I think a lot of people struggle initially, but it's well worth bearing with it, because if you can get them to work, I think they give you yet another tool in your armory to be very sort of interactive with the data. So that's it. That's everything, I think, for this slightly completely recorded webinar. Hopefully next week's will be live. Try and get those technical issues sorted out, and I hope you can join me, and I hope you could hear what I was saying over the last hour or so. So thank you very much for bearing with it. I hope to see you live for next week's webinar. Thank you.